It's
The
all right, just
war-weary
breathe.
cowboy slept, until he woke and froze to find the town's widow in his
I'm here
bed.
now.
James rode slowly along the dusty road leading into his hometown. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky in soft orange and pink shades. His horse, old but steady, followed his every movement without question. The journey had been long. Years of war had taken him far from here, from everything he once knew. And now, returning felt strange. He could see the familiar hills and the small clusters of buildings in the distance, yet they seemed different somehow, almost frozen in time while he had changed so much. The town looked quiet. The saloon's swinging doors moved slightly in the evening breeze, and the wooden sign of the general store creaked gently. The streets were empty, save for a few children chasing each other and laughing loudly, their innocence untouched by the harshness of life. James could hear the sound of a blacksmith hammering on metal somewhere far down the street. It reminded him of a time before war, a time when life was simple and predictable. That memory, soft and fleeting, brought a small, almost painful ache to his chest. James dismounted near the edge of town, tying his horse to a post outside the small cabin he had rented. The cabin was modest, a simple wooden structure with a tin roof, a single room, a fireplace, and a small bed tucked into a corner. It was nothing like the grand houses of the city, nothing like the forts he had stayed in during the war, but it felt right. He wanted a place that demanded little of him, a place where he could just breathe without the constant reminders of battle. As he stepped inside, James felt the quietness in the room wrap around him like a soft blanket. He dropped his travel bag near the door and ran a hand through his hair. His body ached in ways he hadn't noticed until the moment he stopped moving. His back was stiff, his hands rough from years of holding reins, weapons, and heavy packs. The war had left marks that no one could see, and yet every step he took reminded him of battles fought, friends lost, and nights spent in fear. James took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs. There was a calm here he hadn't felt in a long time, and it was almost uncomfortable. He was used to constant noise, to the chaos of war, to the rapid thinking that came with danger. Here in this quiet town, he was left only with himself. That was both a relief and a challenge. He unpacked a few things from his bag, a worn blanket, a tin cup, and a small journal he had kept during his travels. The journal had pages filled with sketches, notes, and small memories he hadn't shared with anyone. Flipping it open, he saw the handwriting that had become sloppy over time, marks of exhaustion and hurried nights. The words spoke of loneliness, of the strange friendships formed with people he might never meet again, and of moments of beauty he had tried to hold onto amidst chaos. Night began to fall, and James started a small fire in the fireplace. The flames danced and flickered, casting shadows on the wooden walls of the cabin. The warmth was comforting, and for the first time in years he felt something like home. He sat in the chair by the fire, his legs stretched out, and listened to the wind outside. The sound of it rushing through the trees and the distant call of an owl reminded him of simpler times, before war had changed everything. He thought of the people he had left behind in the town, friends he had not seen in years, faces he barely remembered. Some were surely gone, others moved away, and some might not even recognize him. The town itself had probably changed as well, small buildings rebuilt, roads repaired, and new families settling in. Change was everywhere, even in a place that felt frozen in time. James knew he needed to rest. His body and mind were tired in a way that sleep alone might not fix, but sleep was a start. He lay down on the simple bed, pulling the worn blanket around him. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the fire crackle and the wind whistle. His thoughts wandered to the war, to the battles he had fought and the friends he had lost. The memories were heavy, but he held them close as if carrying them gave them meaning. In the middle of the night, James dreamed. He saw the battlefields, the smoke and dust, the sounds of gunfire and the cries of men. It was vivid and terrifying, yet strangely distant, like watching someone else's life unfold. When he woke, he felt a lingering tension in his chest and shoulders. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and looked around the cabin. The room was still quiet, the fire reduced to glowing embers. The world outside was calm, yet he could feel a subtle movement, a presence he did not immediately recognize. Slowly he realized he was not alone. Across from him by the bed stood a woman. Her eyes were wide, filled with surprise, and she seemed almost as shocked to see him as he was to see her. James froze, unsure whether to speak or move. The room was silent except for the faint crackle of the dying fire. The woman, Clara, quickly explained herself. She had been caught in the storm outside and had sought shelter, not realizing anyone had rented the cabin. She thought it empty and had simply tried to stay warm. The awkwardness of the situation was clear to both of them. James's initial fear and confusion slowly gave way to understanding. There was no malice, only circumstance and coincidence. James listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. Her voice was soft but steady, and there was something about her presence that felt strangely familiar, almost comforting. He realized that both of them were alone in their own ways, carrying invisible burdens that the other could not yet fully understand. And in that quiet moment, they found a mutual understanding that required no words. The storm outside continued, and James offered her a chair by the fire. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain and the wind. The tension eased, replaced by a quiet companionship that neither expected. The firelight danced across their faces, and in that simple glow, the beginnings of trust were formed. By the time the storm subsided, it was early morning. Clara thanked James for his patience and understanding. She stepped outside, the cool morning air brushing against her face, and made her way home. James watched her go, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. It was not love, not yet, but a sense that he was not completely alone in the world anymore. As he lay back down, James realized that the quiet town, the cabin, and the people he would meet here might help him heal in ways he had never imagined. The war had changed him, shaped him, and left marks that would never fully fade. But here, in this small town, there was a chance to begin again, even if slowly and carefully. For the first time in years, James drifted into a deep sleep, not filled with dreams of battles or loss, but with a quiet hope. Hope that life could be simpler, that human connections could bring comfort, and that even the most war-weary heart could find peace. The night outside was calm now, the storm gone, leaving only the soft whispers of the wind through the trees and the distant sounds of a town waking up to a new day. And so James rested, unaware that this small encounter, so accidental and unexpected, would mark the beginning of a journey filled with challenges, understanding, and a quiet form of companionship that neither he nor Clara had anticipated. The next morning, James woke to the soft sound of birds singing outside his cabin. The sunlight filtered through the small window, painting the wooden walls with warm golden light. He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles from yesterday's long ride. The memory of the previous night's storm and of Clara's unexpected visit lingered in his mind. He felt a strange mix of curiosity and unease. He didn't know much about her, but there was something about her presence that left an impression he could not easily shake. James stepped outside and untied his horse. The town was slowly coming to life. Smoke rose from chimneys, the sound of carts rolling over wooden streets echoed in the distance, and neighbors greeted each other with familiar nods and smiles. Life seemed to continue quietly here, as if the war he had left behind belonged to someone else entirely. Still, the town was not untouched by hardship. Some buildings were weathered, fences leaned to one side, and the paths were worn by time and labor. As James walked toward the small store in town to pick up supplies, he thought about Clara. He had only seen her for a brief moment, but something about her calm voice and steady eyes had struck him. He remembered how she had explained herself during the storm, how she had not reacted with fear or anger. Instead, she had shown understanding, and that had made him realize how rare people like her were. When he reached the store, he found Clara arranging items on the shelves. She moved with quiet confidence, her hands precise as she sorted jars, sacks, and bundles. The store was small but tidy, and the windows were clean, allowing sunlight to brighten the interior. James hesitated near the door, unsure whether to speak first or remain quiet. Clara noticed him immediately and gave a small, polite smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle yet warm. "Did you sleep well? I hope it didn't make your first night back too uncomfortable." He helped Clara with small tasks around the store, carrying sacks of flour or stacking cans on shelves. Though he was unfamiliar with many of the items, his strength and steady hands proved useful. Clara watched him work with quiet appreciation, occasionally offering tips or asking questions about his past. James answered cautiously, sharing only what he felt comfortable with, but the walls around him began to lower bit by bit. Evenings were often spent by the fireplace in his cabin. James would sit and write in his journal, recording memories and thoughts that he had kept locked away during the war. Occasionally, Clara would stop by with a basket of bread or fresh milk. They would sit together in silence or talk about simple things: the weather, the growth of crops, the changes in the town since he had been gone. There was a slow rhythm to their interactions, a sense of calm that neither of them had expected. One afternoon, while helping Clara repair a fence outside the store, James noticed the care she took with everything she did. Her hands were calloused from work, but her movements were precise and deliberate. She worked with a determination that reminded him of the soldiers he had fought alongside, though her battles were quieter, fought with patience and resilience rather than weapons. James admired her silently, feeling a respect that went deeper than friendship. Clara, in turn, began to ask more about James's experiences. She did not press him for details he was uncomfortable sharing, but she listened attentively when he spoke of the places he had been, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. His stories were often painful, yet he told them with a quiet honesty that made her feel connected to him in a way she had not anticipated. She realized that the man before her was strong, not because of what he had endured, but because of the courage it took to return and face life again. The townspeople began to notice the quiet companionship forming between James and Clara. Some commented lightly, others observed silently, but no one spoke judgmentally. Life in the town was slow and measured, and people appreciated kindness and integrity above gossip or assumptions. James, who had once moved from place to place in search of meaning, found the steadiness of this community comforting. Clara's presence became a touchstone, a reminder that trust and connection were possible even after years of loss and hardship. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, James and Clara sat outside the store, sharing a simple meal. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple, and the air was crisp with the coming night. Clara spoke softly of her late husband, of the years she had spent learning to live alone, and of the small joys she had discovered along the way. James listened, feeling a quiet kinship in her words. He realized that everyone carried burdens, visible or invisible, and that sharing them, even in part, brought relief and understanding. "Life can be hard," Clara said, breaking a comfortable silence, "but it also gives us moments like this, moments worth holding on to." He had spent so long surrounded by fear and uncertainty that simple moments like this had become precious. The warmth of the fire, the softness of the evening air, and Clara's calm presence reminded him that life could be gentle, even after years of struggle. Over the weeks, their bond grew stronger. James helped Clara with chores, repaired parts of the store, and even assisted with minor tasks for other townspeople. Clara, in turn, shared her knowledge of the town, helped him feel connected to the community, and offered companionship without asking for anything in return. They laughed quietly together, shared small stories, and celebrated tiny victories: a repaired fence, a successful delivery, a neighbor's smile. These moments, though ordinary, became extraordinary in their simplicity and shared meaning. James began to notice changes in himself. He felt less tension in his shoulders, more ease in his movements, and a calm that had been absent for years. The nightmares from the war were still there occasionally, but they no longer consumed him. He had a place to return to each night, a person who understood him, and the comforting rhythm of daily life that grounded him. Clara noticed changes in herself as well. She felt lighter, more hopeful, and less alone. Her days were still filled with work and responsibility, but the presence of James made the tasks feel less burdensome. She realized that companionship did not mean dependence. It meant sharing life's challenges and joys with someone who respected and cared for you. One late afternoon, a letter arrived for James. It was from a friend he had not seen since the war, someone who had stayed in contact sporadically. The letter reminded him of the life he had left behind, of connections he had almost forgotten. As he read it aloud to Clara, he realized that his past and present were beginning to intersect. The man who had returned from war was not the same as the one who had left, but he could carry both selves forward, learning from experiences and embracing the people around him. By the end of part 2, James and Clara had formed a quiet understanding and companionship that went beyond friendship. Their lives, though ordinary on the surface, were slowly intertwined. They had found in each other a source of trust, comfort, and shared resilience. Neither expected romance, yet a subtle warmth grew between them, a sense of safety and mutual respect that made each day brighter. Through shared labor, conversation, and simple presence, James and Clara discovered that healing was not a grand event but a series of small, meaningful moments. The town, with its quiet streets and steady rhythm, became a place of refuge. And in the calm of their growing connection, both began to understand that life, even after hardship and loss, could offer hope, friendship, and the beginnings of joy. As the days passed, the bond between James and Clara deepened. They had settled into a quiet rhythm, filled with the small, steady tasks of daily life. James spent his mornings repairing fences, helping neighbors, or walking through the town to check on things that needed attention. Clara continued running her store, managing accounts, and caring for her younger brother. Yet despite their busyness, they found time to share small moments together, a conversation over tea, a quiet walk at sunset, or a shared laugh at something silly that had happened in the store. One afternoon, James noticed Clara struggling with a large shipment of goods. She had been trying to carry several heavy sacks at once, balancing them awkwardly in her arms. Without thinking, he stepped forward and lifted the largest one with ease. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said gently. Clara laughed softly, a sound that warmed James in ways he hadn't expected. "I suppose I could use a strong pair of hands every now and then," she admitted, adjusting her load with his help. Their teamwork made the task easier, and they finished in less time than Clara had anticipated. It was in moments like this that James realized companionship was not just about sharing stories, but also about sharing effort and support. After the shipment was stored, Clara suggested they take a short break. They walked outside, carrying mugs of warm tea, and settled on the porch. The wind carried the scent of nearby fields, and the soft hum of the town's daily life filled the air. For a while, they simply sat in silence, enjoying the calm and the comfort of being together. "You know," Clara said finally, breaking the quiet, "I used to feel so alone after my husband died. It was as if the world had gone on without me, leaving me behind." She looked at James, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and acceptance. "I didn't think anyone would ever understand that feeling." "I understand more than I can say," he replied quietly. "Being away so long, seeing so much, it changes you. You return thinking the world is the same, but it is. And yet, you have to keep going, even if it feels impossible." They sat like that for a few moments, simply sharing the human need for connection, for understanding, and for comfort. It was not love, not yet, but it was something essential, the recognition that they were not alone anymore. The days turned into weeks, and James found himself more comfortable in the town than he had imagined. He helped neighbors with repairs, offered his strength where needed, and even attended small town events, slowly becoming part of the community he had once left behind. Clara's presence guided him through this transition, her knowledge of the town and its people helping him reconnect with a world that had seemed distant and foreign. One evening, after a long day of work, James and Clara sat outside her store, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was a soft mixture of orange, pink, and purple, and the air was cool with the approaching night. Clara spoke of her late husband, sharing memories that were both bittersweet and tender. James listened, careful to offer comfort without intrusion. He understood that sharing grief was not easy, and that being present was often more meaningful than offering words. "Sometimes I wonder if I will ever feel normal again," Clara admitted softly. "After everything I've been through after losing him, I don't know if I can." It's not about going back to how things were. It's about finding a new way to live, a way that allows you to feel, to heal, and to keep moving forward. It's just easier to feel that way when someone else understands. As the days grew cooler with the approaching autumn, James began preparing his cabin for the change in season. He repaired the roof, stacked firewood, and cleaned the fireplace. Clara occasionally brought him meals or stopped by to chat, and their conversations became more personal, though still respectful and gentle. They shared stories of their past, their hopes for the future, and small dreams that had seemed distant but were slowly becoming attainable. One crisp morning, James decided to explore the hills surrounding the town. He invited Clara to join him, and she agreed. They walked along a narrow path, the leaves crunching underfoot, the air fresh and invigorating. The town spread out below them, quiet and calm, while the distant hills rolled gently into the horizon. For a while they walked without speaking, enjoying the beauty of the world around them. Eventually, Clara broke the silence. "I used to love walking in the hills with my husband," she said. "It reminds me of him, but it also makes me feel peaceful. Like I can breathe again." James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of months of travel, war, and uncertainty lift slightly. Clara stood beside him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They simply existed together in that quiet, shared space. As they walked back to town, James realized how much he had come to rely on Clara's presence. Her quiet strength, her understanding, and her kindness had become an anchor in a world that had once seemed chaotic and unmanageable. He, too, offered stability and support to her, helping her navigate her own grief and responsibilities. Their bond was growing, not through grand gestures but through consistent care, trust, and shared experiences. Back in town, life continued its gentle rhythm. James and Clara attended to daily chores, helped neighbors, and spent quiet evenings together. The townspeople, noticing their steady presence, began to trust James more, seeking his help or advice when needed. Clara's respect for him grew, not just for his strength but for the patience and understanding he showed to everyone around him. One evening, as they sat by the fire in James's cabin, Clara brought out a small photo of her late husband. She handed it to James, her expression thoughtful. "I wanted to show you," she said softly. "It's important to remember where we come from, even as we move forward." He felt a quiet respect for the past, understanding that grief and healing could coexist. He returned the photo gently, nodding. "Thank you for sharing this," he said. "It helps me understand you better. You help me feel like life can continue, even after everything I've lost." As the fire crackled and the night grew colder outside, James and Clara sat together in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. Both knew that the road ahead would not always be easy. Life in the town had its challenges, and their own pasts would continue to shape them. Yet they also knew that together, they could face those challenges with strength, patience, and care. By the end of Part 3, James and Clara's relationship had grown into a quiet, unspoken partnership. They were no longer just neighbors or acquaintances. They were companions in the truest sense, supporting each other, understanding each other, and finding comfort in shared moments. Life, once heavy and lonely for both of them, had begun to feel lighter, filled with hope and possibility. Through daily acts of kindness, simple conversations, and shared experiences, they discovered that healing was not a destination but a journey. Each day brought new opportunities for connection, understanding, and quiet joy. And in these moments, they both realized that even after hardship and loss, life could offer something beautiful, the chance to care for and trust another human being. As autumn deepened, the air grew crisp, and the days became shorter. James and Clara continued their routines, yet the quiet companionship they shared grew richer and more comforting. There was a rhythm to their days that neither had expected, a balance between work, reflection, and the slow warmth of human connection. James spent mornings helping neighbors with repairs, fixing fences, or assisting at the small farmhouses surrounding the town. Clara ran her store, managed her brother's schooling, and continued her careful tending of the household. Despite the busyness, they always found small moments to share, a cup of tea, a short walk, or a quiet conversation before sunset. One chilly afternoon, James noticed Clara struggling with some repairs at the back of her store. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves, and the small wooden board she was trying to fix threatened to slip from her hands. Without hesitation, James stepped forward. "Let me help," he said softly, lifting the boards with ease. Clara glanced at him and smiled faintly. "You're always around when I need a hand," she said, a trace of amusement in her voice. "I suppose I can't argue with that." The simple act of helping each other had become a natural part of their growing connection, a way to support and protect without needing to speak too much. They had learned that small gestures often mattered more than grand declarations, that shared effort could build trust and understanding. As they finished, Clara invited James to stay for a cup of tea. They sat by the small fire in her home, the warmth against their cheeks and the aroma of brewed leaves comforting in the cool air. They spoke of ordinary things, the coming winter, the state of the crops, the neighbors' plans, yet beneath the casual conversation was a deeper thread of familiarity and mutual care. "You know," Clara said softly, stirring her tea, "I never thought I would feel this way again, not after everything I've lost." She looked at James, her eyes reflecting both sadness and hope. "It's strange but comforting. You make life feel a little lighter." War had left invisible marks, yet her presence made him feel steadier, less burdened. "I know what you mean," he replied. "Life after loss isn't easy, but having someone who understands makes it a little easier to face each day." They discovered small joys in ordinary moments. The way sunlight streamed through the trees, the laughter of children playing in the street, the comforting rhythm of their shared labor. Life was simple, but in its simplicity they found beauty. One evening, a traveling preacher came to the town. The townspeople gathered in the small chapel, eager to hear his words and share in a sense of community. James and Clara attended together, sitting quietly in a pew near the back. The preacher spoke of resilience, of finding hope after hardship, and of the importance of connection. His words resonated deeply with both of them. As they walked home afterward, Clara spoke softly. "It's strange how a few words can make you think differently about your own life," she said. "I've been so focused on what I've lost that I forgot to notice what I still have." James worked to prepare his cabin for the season, stacking firewood, repairing the roof, and ensuring the fireplace was ready for long evenings. Clara often stopped by, bringing warm meals or stopping to chat. Their conversations grew more personal, their trust deeper. James began to share more of his past, not the horrors of war, but the lessons he had learned, the people he had met, and the small moments of hope that had carried him through dark times. Clara, in turn, spoke of her late husband, her family, and the small joys that had kept her going through difficult days. One snowy afternoon, a letter arrived for Clara from a distant relative. She read it aloud to James, sharing news of family, friends, and events from far away. James listened attentively, asking questions and offering support. Their shared attention to each other's lives strengthened their bond, making them realize that even small acts of care could mean a great deal. As the snow settled over the town, James and Clara began spending more evenings together. They would sit by the fire, talking quietly, sharing stories, or simply enjoying the warmth. One night, Clara brought out an old quilt, carefully patched and mended over the years. She draped it over both of them, and for a moment they simply sat in silence, the fire crackling and the snow falling softly outside. In these moments, James felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. The war, the loneliness, the uncertainty, all of it seemed distant, replaced by the quiet rhythm of life and the steady presence of someone who cared. Clara felt similarly. Her grief had not vanished, but it had softened, replaced by a sense of companionship and trust. They had discovered that healing was not a sudden event but a gradual process, built on shared moments, understanding, and gentle support. One afternoon, while walking through the snowy streets, James noticed a neighbor struggling to repair a fence. Without hesitation, he offered his help. Clara accompanied him, carrying tools and offering encouragement. Together, they worked efficiently, the neighbor grateful for their assistance. The simple act reminded James that life was not just about enduring hardships, but also about supporting others and finding purpose in small, meaningful actions. As the days passed, James and Clara's connection continued to grow. They began to understand each other in ways that did not require words. A glance, a shared smile, or a quiet gesture spoke volumes. Their companionship had become a source of strength and comfort, a reminder that even after loss and hardship, it was possible to find connection, understanding, and hope. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat outside James's cabin, watching the snow fall softly around them. Clara spoke of her memories, her hopes, and the dreams she had once thought impossible. James listened, offering quiet encouragement and understanding. "Life is full of challenges," he said softly, "but we can face them together. You don't have to carry everything alone. Having someone to share the load, it changes everything. It makes life feel lighter, more manageable." Through shared effort, trust, and understanding, they had built something strong and enduring, a foundation upon which they could face the future, no matter what it held. By the end of Part 4, James and Clara had formed a partnership rooted in respect, trust, and shared experiences. Their lives, though ordinary in appearance, were rich with meaning and connection. They had discovered that true companionship was not about grand gestures or dramatic events, but about the quiet, steady presence of someone who understood, supported, and cared. Through the changing seasons, the harsh winters, and the challenges of daily life, they had found something precious, a sense of belonging, of hope, and of resilience. Life had not been easy, but together they had learned that it could be gentle, comforting, and filled with small, meaningful joys. And in this gentle rhythm, they discovered the beginning of something lasting, a bond that would carry them through whatever the future held. Winter had settled firmly over the town, covering the streets, fields, and rooftops with a soft, white blanket of snow. The days were short, and the nights were long and quiet. James and Clara had grown accustomed to this rhythm, finding comfort in the small routines that winter demanded. James spent hours chopping firewood, repairing fences, and helping neighbors prepare for the cold months. Clara managed her store, making sure families had supplies and checking on her younger brother, who was now growing taller and stronger with each passing day. Despite the chill, James and Clara continued to find warmth in each other's company. The quiet companionship they shared had deepened into something neither had expected, a bond rooted in trust, understanding, and shared experience. They no longer needed to speak every thought aloud. A glance or a gentle smile could communicate what words often could not. The presence of each other had become a source of comfort, a steady light in a world that still held uncertainty. One evening, As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting a soft golden glow over the snow-covered town, James and Clara walked together through the main street. The townspeople had lit small lanterns, and the warm glow reflected on the snow, creating a sense of peace and calm. Children laughed as they played, their footprints leaving trails in the fresh snow. The sight reminded both James and Clara that life, despite its hardships, still held moments of simple beauty. They paused near the small chapel, where the bell chimed softly, announcing the approaching evening. Clara's eyes softened as she looked at the building. "I remember coming here with my husband," she said quietly. "It was always a place of comfort, a place to think, to hope. They help us see that there is still goodness in the world, even if it feels far away at times." He knew that their connection was rare, and he treasured it quietly without needing to define it in grand terms. Back at James's cabin, they settled by the fire with mugs of warm tea. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows across the room. Clara spoke of her memories, both happy and sad, sharing stories of her late husband, her childhood, and the small moments that had shaped her life. James listened carefully, understanding that these stories were pieces of her heart, offered in trust. "I never thought I'd feel hope again," Clara said softly. "But having someone here, someone who understands, who listens, it changes everything. But we can find peace in the small moments, in being here for each other. That's what matters." Each day reinforced their trust and companionship, and the bond between them grew stronger. They had discovered that healing was not a destination but a process, built on patience, understanding, and shared effort. One particularly cold morning, James awoke to the sound of soft knocking at his cabin door. When he opened it, he found Clara standing there, a small basket in her hands. "I thought you might like some breakfast," she said with a smile, her cheeks rosy from the cold. James accepted the basket, feeling a warmth in his chest that went beyond the fire. "Thank you," he said simply. "You always think of others, even when you have so much to do yourself. That's what matters." As the weeks went on, James and Clara began to think more about the future. The town had become a place of belonging, a place where they could find stability and purpose. They discussed ways to improve the store, help neighbors more effectively, and make the town feel even more like a community. Each plan, each idea, strengthened their connection and their sense of shared purpose. One evening, after finishing a long day of work, James and Clara sat outside, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun set over the hills. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and purple, and the snow glistened in the fading light. Clara rested her head on James's shoulder, a gesture of trust and comfort that spoke more than words could. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought I could feel this calm again. It's been so long since life felt steady, since I felt like I belonged somewhere. It's about finding a place, and a person, that makes the present feel meaningful." It was not dramatic or sudden, but steady and enduring, the kind of companionship that could carry them through life's challenges. As winter began to give way to early signs of spring, the snow melted slowly, revealing the green shoots of new growth. James and Clara continued their routines, but now there was a sense of hope in their hearts. They had weathered the harshest months together, supported each other, and built a bond that could withstand the difficulties of life. One morning, as the first crocuses appeared along the path to the town, James turned to Clara. "Life has changed for both of us," he said quietly. "We've been through so much, yet here we are. Stronger, steadier, and ready to face whatever comes next." It was more than friendship, more than simple companionship. It was a quiet, enduring connection that gave them both strength, comfort, and hope for the future. Together, they began to make plans for the coming months, repairs to the store, improvements to James's cabin, and small projects to help the town flourish. Each step they took was done side by side, their partnership evident in every action. Life, once lonely and uncertain for both of them, had become filled with meaning, purpose, and shared joy. By the end of Part 5, James and Clara had found a sense of home, not just in the town but in each other. Their lives, once marked by loss, hardship, and loneliness, had been transformed by patience, trust, and quiet companionship. They had discovered that true healing was found not in grand events, but in the small, steady moments of support, understanding, and care. The town, once a place James had only returned to out of habit, had become a place of belonging. Clara, once weighed down by grief and responsibility, had found in James a steady presence, a source of comfort and understanding. Together, they faced the future with hope, knowing that whatever challenges came, they would face them together, strengthened by the bond they had built. Life, they realized, was not about forgetting the past or erasing hardships. It was about finding meaning, connection, and joy in the present. And in each other, they had found all of that, a steady, enduring companionship that would carry them through whatever lay ahead.